Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Ketubot. We are up to Perek Tet, Mishnah Tet. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai Veliyahu ben Burcha Israel ben Chana bat Miriam Menuchatam Began Eden Amen Elavdi ben Chaim Lechaim v'derefua shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa betoch Shah Cholei Israel. The Mishnah discusses what proof a woman must bring in order to collect her Ketubah payment. Usually a woman cannot collect the payment unless she shows her Ketubah document. In some places, however, it was the practice not to write a Ketubah document. Now, it's not necessary to record the basic Ketubah commitments, such as the obligation to pay 100 or 200 zuz or to ransom her if she is kidnapped in a document, because these are rabbinic obligations that apply even if there are no documents. The Mishnah teaches how women can collect their Ketubah in such places where, again, it was the practice not to write a Ketubah document. If a woman came to court to claim her Ketubah and she produced a get, a document of divorce, which shows that she was divorced, but there is no Ketubah document with it, Gova Ketubata, she can collect her Ketubah, even if her husband says that he already paid her. Although she has no proof that he still owes her, the rabbis decree that she is entitled to her Ketubah as though she were holding the document in her hands. The general rule is that when one person claims another owes him money and he has a document signed by two witnesses in which the obligation is recorded, the defendant is not believed to say that he already paid. The very fact that they claim it is holding the document serves as proof that the obligation was not paid, because if it were, the document would have been torn up. In the case of the Ketubah, however, the woman does not need to produce a Ketubah document, because the rabbis enacted that a woman coming to collect her payment has the same legal authority as someone who is holding a document. To make sure that she does not take her get to a different court to collect her Ketubah a second time, the court tears her get and writes a note on the back that says, "We tore this get not because it is invalid, but so she cannot use it to collect her Ketubah again." This way she can still use the get to prove that she is divorced in order to remarry. And in addition, she must give a receipt to the husband for his payment, as the Mishnah will soon teach. Now the Mishnah refers only to the basic payment of 100 or 200 zuz. In order to collect anything else, meaning any additional amount that her husband might have agreed to her, or the value of the Tzom Barzil property, she must produce the document in which the extra obligations are recorded. Now the Mishnah's ruling applies only in places where the practice was not to write a Ketubah document. In other places, she must show her document to the court to get paid, because if a woman is expected to have a document and yet does not show one, her claim is weakened and the court rules against her. The opposite situation, Ketubah v'nimah get, if she produced a Ketubah document even though it was not customary in that place to write one, but there is no get with it. Now the absence of her get indicates that she was paid. Since she does not have her get, there is reason to suspect that she was already paid and that the get was torn, like we said earlier. He omeret avad giti, but she says my get was lost. Vu omer avad shovari. As for the husband, if he had already paid her as he claims, he should have a receipt, but he says my receipt was lost. V'chen bal chov sheotzi shta chov. A similar case and where a lender produced a loan document to collect his money from the borrower, but it is now after Shemitah when debts are cancelled. Venimo prosbul, and he has no prosbul with him, a document that allows the lender to claim the money even after Shemitah. Now every seventh year is known as Shemitah, the sabbatical year. The Torah in Sefer Dvarim chapter 15 verse 2 states that all loans due before the end of Shemitah are cancelled. Once Shemitah has passed, the lender may not even ask for his money back. Now when the sages saw that people were not lending money to the poor for fear that they would not get paid back, which transgresses a biblical commandment, in Sefer Dvarim chapter 15 verse 9, they decreed that if a lender writes a document known as a prosbul before the end of Shemitah, the loan is not cancelled and he may still collect it. Now the reason a prosbul works is that although the Torah forbids a lender to demand payment after Shemitah, it does not forbid a court to do so. By writing a prosbul, the lender transfers his loan to the court, which can then collect the money from the borrower and give it to the lender. To simplify matters, the lender himself acts as the court's agent for the collection and then keeps the money. This is discussed in Mishnah Masechet Shvi'it, chapter 10, Mishnah 3 and 4. So again, the lender says that he wrote a prosbul and lost it. These two claimants, the woman and the lender, cannot be paid. Since the woman does not have her get, we suspect that she already used it to collect her Ketubah. Now we learned that when a woman comes to claim her Ketubah, the husband is not believed to say that he paid it. In this case, however, he is believed. Since a divorce usually takes great care to protect her get, because it allows her to remarry, her claim that she lost it is highly suspect. It therefore seems likely that she used the get to collect her Ketubah and that it was torn, like we said earlier. And since the lender does not have a prosbul, we suspect that he never wrote one. Now, a Tana teaches that the previous law stopped applying at a certain point in history. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Mina sakana ve'elach, ever since the times of danger when idolaters made decrees forbidding the Jews from doing mitzvot, and people were afraid to keep mitzvah-related documents, Isha govach ktubata shelo beget, a woman can collect her ketubah even without producing a get, Ubal chov govesh shelo beprosbol, and the lender can collect his loan even without producing a prosbol. At that time, it became the practice to burn a get immediately after receiving it, and to burn a prosbol immediately after writing it. Therefore, the fact that a woman or lender fails to produce the required document in court does not give us reason to suspect that either one is lying. Even after the decrees against mitzvah were no longer in effect, the law remained the same in case similar decrees would be made in the future. The Mishnah teaches how many ketubah payments someone can collect after two marriages to the same men, or if she has two ketubah documents from one marriage. Shnei gitin u'shtei ketubot. If a woman produces two gitin and two different ketubot, which show that she married the same man twice and that he wrote her a new ketubah each time he married her, gova shtei ketubot. She collects two ketubot from him. Shtei ketubot veget echad. But if she produces two ketubot and one get, which showed that he married her once and wrote her two ketubot during the same marriage, he wrote her a ketubah document when they married, then later during their marriage she wrote another one in which he promised her a larger sum of money, or ketubah ushne gitin, or if she produces a ketubah and two gitin which show that he married her twice but wrote only a ketubah, wrote a ketubah only when he married her the first time, or ketubah veget umitar, if she produces a ketubah, a get, and proof of her husband's death, meaning two witnesses who testify that the husband died, which show, like in the previous case, they married her twice and died after the second marriage, but wrote a ketubah only when he married her the first time, and no goval ketubah achat. In all of these three cases, she can collect only one ketubah. In the first of the three cases, where the husband wrote two ketubahs for one marriage, she can collect only one of them because he never intended she should collect both. The reason he wrote two documents is not to let her collect two payments, but to give her a choice. Each document has an advantage and a disadvantage. The second one promises a larger sum, but since it was written later, the money will be harder to collect. The first one promises a smaller sum, but since it was written earlier, it will be easier to collect because the woman can collect her ketubah from land that her husband had sold only if the land was sold after the document was written. Therefore, the later the document, the less useful it is. After he wrote the first document, the husband decided to write a second, more generous one, but he let her keep the first one so she will be able to choose which one she wants to use when the time to collect comes. And in the last two cases, where she has one ketubah for two marriages, she can collect only one payment even though she was married twice. Sham gereshet ishto v'echzira al mena ketubah rishona machzira. Because one who divorces his wife and remarries her without writing a new ketubah presumably remarries her on the condition that her first ketubah is effective for their second marriage as well. And the Mishnah gives two examples where a ketubah written for a first marriage suffices for a second marriage as well. Katan shesio aviv, if a boy was married off by his father and he wrote a ketubah for his wife. Now, while he was still a child, he and his wife were not actually married because a father has no legal authority to marry off his son. But if they stay together after he turns 13, they become legally married. So the Mishnah says, Ketubata kayemet, or ketubah stays in force even after he becomes an adult at age 13 and, so to speak, remarries her. Shalmanat ken kaima, because it was on this condition that he kept her, meaning he remarries her with understanding that the original ketubah still applies. Even though he wrote the ketubah as a child, when he cannot make a binding commitment, it is understood that by staying married to her after he turns 13, he newly accepts the terms of the original ketubah. Ger shenit ger v'ishto, most similarly, if a convert to Judaism converted together with his wife and he had written her a ketubah before they converted, now it's not referring to a standard ketubah since they were not Jewish, but to a promise that he will pay her a certain amount of money if he dies before her or divorces her, ketubata kayemet, or ketubah stays in force even after they convert and he, so to speak, remarries her, shalmanat ken kaima, because it was on this condition that he kept her, meaning he remarries her with understanding that the original ketubah still applies. That is in Rabotai of Perek Ted, Mishnah Ted. We continue now with Perek Yud, Mishnah Aleph. The Mishnah deals with cases in which a man married more than one wife. Mishna Yomi Vamet. If someone is married to two wives and died without leaving enough property to pay both of their ketubot, the wife who was married first comes, meaning collects her ketubah before the one who was married second, and the second one takes only the property that remains. The first wife has priority because the husband's property was pledged to her ketubah before it was pledged to the second wife's ketubah. And if both wives die and their heirs collect their ketubah, the heirs of the first wife come before the heirs of the second wife. And if only the first wife died and the second remained alive, the first wife's heirs have property of the second wife herself. A related case, Nasad Rishona v'meta, if he married the first wife and she died, so he inherited her. Nasad Shniya met too, and he married a second wife and then he died, and the sons of the first wife want to collect the ketubah of the male children, while the second wife wants to collect her regular ketubah, but there is not enough property for both. The law is Shniya v'yorsheh kodmim liyorsheh rishona. The second wife or her heirs who are collecting an actual ketubah come before the heirs of the first wife who seek the ketubah of the male children. Now, like we learned earlier in chapter 4, Mishnah 10, the sages instituted that if a woman dies before her husband, but they have sons together, the sons take property equal to the value of her ketubah after their father dies. This is known as the ketubah of the male children, ketubah benin dechrin. It is separate from the regular inheritance that they share equally with the sons of any other wife. But again, the Mishnah said if it comes to this ketubah of the male children versus the second wife's actual ketubah, but there is not enough property for both, the law is the second wife or her heirs who are collecting an actual ketubah come before the heirs of the first wife who want the ketubah of the male children. The ketubah of the male children is considered part of their inheritance as indicated by the language of the ketubah document. Male children that you have from me will inherit the money of your ketubah, like we learned in chapter 4, Mishnah 10. The general law is that heirs must pay their father's debt, including the ketubahs he owes his wife, before they can take their inheritance. Therefore, the sons of the first wife who are heirs of the husband must first pay the ketubah of the second wife, and they inherit only whatever remains. That is an Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.